Hey everyone, so this is my discussion board 3. And so for the first one, in what ways could you vary your teaching techniques to ensure you are reaching all of your various learning abilities you may have in your classroom? Well, this is something that I've always felt a strong pull to. I've always felt very strongly about learning and understanding each one of my students and their needs, the way they learn, and kind of just how to help them better. Each student learns, of course, in their own way. Even if you have 2 students who are visual learners, they still learn differently. So in my classroom, I'm really hoping to be able to use all the different learning styles. So verbal, which could be explaining and lecturing, and then with visual, that could be reading a book, it could be watching a movie or like a little clip on YouTube. It could also be me doing an activity and doing an example first and showing them how to do it. Also having activities that are hands-on, and they could be different activities. So a hands-on activity that I would want to use could be cut and paste for first grade. Could be using Legos and blocks to help segment and blend our words. So those are some other things that I would like to incorporate in my lessons as a technique. Also, I really want to do different things to be creative, to use chants and games and songs, different manipulations. So another technique that I want to use in my classroom to help the different learning styles and stuff is something that I know is being pushed a little more in classrooms, and that's using STEM projects and STEM activities. Whenever I was reading through chapter 6, especially in section 3, whenever it was talking about being independent and dependent and the learning styles and the ways that you can teach, and how each child needs to learn independently and they need to learn dependently, it really tugged at my heart because that's something I'm passionate about whenever it comes to teaching. And so to help with that, a technique that I would like to incorporate in my classroom would be the STEM projects and STEM activities, because that's something that, our lectures and our classwork is more independent work. And then those the STEM projects and activities is more dependent, and it gives them a way to be more creative and use that critical thinking. So what if I was to be asked to teach online or virtual? Would that change my techniques? I still would want to use the same techniques and teach to each learning style and use all the different techniques. But I would have to do that a little bit different. Whereas in the classroom, I could offer all my children the same manipulatives, versus if it was online or virtual, I could say, hey, tomorrow prepare 20 counters. You could use uncooked noodles, you can find little Legos, you could use pennies or coins. So for hands-on, I would change it up to where they could use what was available to them. And then with visuals, I could still hold a book and read it to them virtually. I can also upload a YouTube video and do visuals that way. And I can also pull up the book on the Zoom slide and go through it with them so they have a better chance to look at it as well. It'd be bigger, so to say. And then, of course, I just mentioned Zoom, so that's one way we could do verbal teaching through online. You can do the songs and the chants and the games just as well online. So really what I feel like would change would be the hands-on activities, because of the materials that they would need, along with the way that they would submit and do their assignments. Depending on how virtual would go, would be if they could turn in those paper assignments or if they would need to submit them online. And then for our choice, I chose How Can Sequencing Help You Bring Together Isolated Pieces of Information to Form an Organized Body of Knowledge. So this is something that I also really enjoyed reading. So whenever you first read about sequencing in our text in chapter 6, one of the very first things it talks about is how sequencing is the art of developing a logical plan for instructional activities that will help your students effectively, and that really stood out to me, master a body of knowledge. And it immediately took me back to beginning of the school year, the class that I'm a TA and a teacher's assistant in. We really went back a little bit to help some of our first graders with their phonemic sounds and relearning phonemic awareness because a lot of them were struggling. So as soon as I was reading about sequencing, phonemic awareness, segmenting, blending sounds so that we can learn to be better readers, that's what popped in my head. So that's the example I used. And basically by starting with the basic concepts first, it makes it more manageable for those students. Then as you build on the concept, you teach how they work together, and the children get a more meaningful bit of knowledge versus just learning something to be taught it, learning something to memorize it. That's not what our children come to us for. That's not our job as educators. So using sequencing really helps build what they're learning and put it all together. So the 4 steps whenever you're sequencing, from what I was reading, your simple step, well, that would be learning what the short A sound is and how to hold your mouth to form that sound. And then your concrete example would be breaking those words down as whole groups. So maybe during carpet time, we learned to sound out and segment the word and, and then we blend it together, and then adding complexity to the lesson, that will be having them sound and segment and blend on their own. And then finally, for introducing the abstracts, that would be when the child finally has that concept, because we may have to go back again to different parts of this and reteach part of them, because not all children learn the same, as we were talking about. So, but once you get to the final stage of this, that child will be able to sound and segment and blend those words when reading, and it's just amazing. So that would be the final step in sequencing, is them being able to read all together and stopping and saying, hey, this is a short A sound, and getting those concepts. So sequencing, it really tugged at me, and I loved reading about it. Honestly, chapter 6, I've read it twice, the whole chapter, because it really, I really loved it. I really liked reading about it. It was something that I'm passionate about teaching to each child the way they need to be taught. So